And good morning. Today is the 18th day of Iyar, and you know what that is. That's Lag BaOmer. Every year, Lag BaOmer falls on the 18th of Iyar. Today is also the 18th of May. We want to welcome everybody and say hello. We are going to go around the room here and introduce everyone to the camera. Just say hi, Mom. There we go.
This might be got my head. Oh no, that's me. Hey.
You don't want your body, Fred.
Good morning, everybody.
All right,
Good
and that's the
morning.
crowd here this morning. Those who are not here, well, you should be jealous of those who are here. Okay. We are about.
Robert, do you need that too? Oh, you got one? Okay, everyone got?
Thank you. We are about to begin the story of the four worlds. Last week we went through a long introduction of the author and how this came about. Now we are going to discuss the actual contents of this essay, introduction and summary. We did this last week, but we're going to do it once more, a little bit briefer than last week. It arose within the will of the Infinite One, blessed be His name, to emanate, create, form, and actualize His worlds, known as the worlds of Atzilut, Bariya, Yetzira, and Asiya. This is quoted from Sha'ar HaHakdamot to Rush Abiyah, beginning Eitz Chaim 143. As we discussed last week, Eitz Chaim is a major Kabbalistic book. You can't know Kabbalah without knowing Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim means tree of life. If you look into our shul, you'll see a tree of life beginning to sprout leaves on the wall, and the word life is Chaim, but the author of the book also was named Chaim. That's why he called it Eitz Chaim. Who was the author of this book? Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital learned and lived in Tzfat, in the holy city of Israel, in Tzfat, North Israel, and he's actually buried there on the mountain together with his teacher, the Ari, or the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria grew up elsewhere. He studied with some kind of angel, and then was told to head to Tzfat to intermingle with the Kabbalists that were living there, including Chaim Vital. He got to Tzfat, and they immediately appointed him as their leader because it was obvious that this person was way beyond anything. He only lived there for a couple of years, but when he taught Torah, it was always recorded by Rabbi Chaim Vital. And so therefore Rabbi Chaim Vital eventually published this book on his name, but really it contained all the Torah that he heard from his teacher, the Arizal. The Arizal is buried also in Tzfat, and his student Rabbi Chaim Vital is found there as well. Friday night services, L'cha Dodi, I'm sure you've heard of that. That was written by the Kabbalists of Tzfat. There was no such thing as a Friday night Kabbalah Shabbat. All this stuff without the Kabbalists. The Kabbalists are the ones who compose this and ask that this should be part of the service, and now everybody does it. The hymn L'cha Dodi was written by Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, also buried in that area, and the words of the opening words of each phrase spells Shlomo Halevi. Shama v'zochar, Hisnari, Hisarari, Losiv, all the letters spell out Shlomo Halevi. It's got his name in there. And all Jews, that's what makes going to Israel so special, when someone points out these things, that these are part of our history that are in front of us. Anyway, so he writes in the name of his teacher, the Arizal, that it rose within the will of the Infinite One to emanate, create, form, and actualize his worlds. Four different expressions: emanate and create, form, and actualize. Those four worlds in Hebrew are Atzilut, which means emanate, Bariya, which means create, Yetzira, which means to form, and Asiya means to actualize. So that's where you have these expressions. So from the Ari, who lived, by the way, in the 1500s, so from him we have a definition of these four worlds. The truth is, he doesn't express this by him. He doesn't come up with this himself. This is found in the scriptures, in the books, in the written Torah. Not actually in the 5 books of Moses, but in and later on in the other books, as we'll soon see. The writings of Hasidus and Kabbalah are replete with mention of spiritual, ethereal worlds and realms. That means worlds that are out of the physical dimension. Spiritual worlds. Indeed, the existence of these worlds is one of the most fundamental concepts in the mystical doctrine that these worlds exist. But what exactly are spiritual worlds? If they're spiritual, then what kind of worlds are these? Worlds? World is a limited place. You have even if you say a universe, it has a certain amount. Spirituality doesn't have any space. What does a world mean? A world of, and what's in that world, and why is it necessary to have this world? In 1937, a certain N.A. Horowitz from Vilna, Lithuania, asked Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the sixth Rebbe of Chabad Lubavitch, two questions on this very topic. Someone else is trying to maneuver in here. Two questions on this very topic. The letter printed here is Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak's response. The baby. The questions, here are the questions. Firstly, can we conceive of these spiritual worlds as existing in physical space? That would be somewhere above our world, one above the other. You say a world. So you imagine a round figure, and on top of our world somewhere is another world with all kinds of issues in their world and all kinds of worldly things in their world. So can you imagine the spiritual worlds being piled up one on top of the other, 1, 2, 3, 4, on top of our world? If not, how are they separate from one another? You're talking spirituality here. Spiritual doesn't have any limitations, doesn't have any space, doesn't work the same way as our world. So what does it mean? In other words, we understand how one object differs from another object within our world. Object A occupies space A, while object B occupies space B. So if you have a bunch of cups on the table, well, your cup is here, my cup is there, the other cup is there. So we have cups, and the objects are separated from one another. They can't all be in the same place at once. It's impossible, because each object in this world takes up space. That's how this world works. Those are the rules of this world. Those are the rules of nature, that things occupy space. Indeed, the very fact that a physical object occupies a given space precludes the possibility of another physical object occupying that same space. You can't have two objects in the same space. It's not possible. You can't have apple and an orange in the same spot. They have to be separated. You can't have people like in the same place. They have to have a separation. They may be squeezed together, but you can't have them in the exact same space. Each person, each thing occupies a separate space in this physical world. It is in this manner that two physical objects differ from each other, because each one of them takes up different space. But how do two spiritual entities differ from one another? Because in the spiritual world there is no space. Space only exists in a location that time exists. When time exists, then space is important. When there is no time, and there is no need for time in the other worlds, then there will be no space. For what would you need space for? They're spiritual beings. There is no space. Spiritual beings are not physical, so they don't have to be in the separate locations. They can be in the same place at the same time. The rules of a spiritual world doesn't work in the same way of the physical world. So if they are separated from one another, then I get it. But explain to me how are they separated? If they're not separated from one another, then and if not separated from one another, how do you have four worlds? Four different worlds. Now this prompts a second question. That was his first question. And the second question is, Hasidus describes God's relation to the world in two manners. in an immanent or internal manner, and in a transcendent or surrounding manner. Now, that is something that we've touched upon a number of times in our classes. We have an immanent manner means, or inner manner means, that the energy of God comes to this world the way it comes. That means you have a cat having its energy, you have a worm has its godly energy, everything has a soul. You have grass, you have a chicken, you have roses, you have trees, you have rocks, you have everything with its specific energy. And then, of course, you have people, animals. Now, it's impossible that the energy of a cat is the same energy as a person. Or the energy of the spiritual energy of a cat is the same spiritual energy of a worm. The worm can't do certain things. It can't speak, it can't see. It's a very limited organism. A cat can see, can communicate voice by voice. It can run, it can jump, it can eat, it can sleep. It does all kinds, and it needs all of those things. It can get sick, it can get healthy. It doesn't have that many enemies. It's very different than the worm, which is a lowly creature. If you take it even further, a worm at least is independently able to move around and go from one place to another place. A tree can't. A blade of grass can't. It's stuck where it is. If you pull it out, it's finished. It's over. So the energy of a worm is obviously more than the energy of a grass, but a lot less than the energy of a cat. The energy of a cat, in other words, spiritual energy of a cat, is a lot less than the spiritual energy of a person. Because a person can do a lot more than a cat. A person can think, hopefully. And a person can communicate. A person can write. A person can speak. I've got to take this phone call. This is from my reptile guys, the guys who are coming here. Just hold on a second. Hello, good morning. Hey, Glenn, good morning. Nice to speak to you. How's everything? We had a great Shabbat over here, but it would have been greater if you would have come to join us. That's a commercial, yes. That's okay. So are we on for? Yes, of course. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Of course. Thank you. That's all right. That's fine. How many animals? As many as you have. Bring them on. Yes, I think that would be lovely. Yeah. Right. Adam Eliyahu. Beautiful. Wow, that's great names. Thank you so much, Glenn. I really appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Absolutely, and I'm counting on it. All right. Fantastic. Thank you, Glenn. God bless you. Okay, all the best. Bye-bye. All right, we're on.
Good.
Okay. So the cat doesn't come close to the spiritual energy that we have. In other words, the mere fact that we have all these talents and abilities indicates that our spiritual energy, our godly energy, is much more, much stronger. And for this reason, it is demanded of us more. And it's not demanded of us to be food for other creatures, as other things may be in this world. It is demanded of us to impact the world, to change the world, to make the world a better place than when it was when we arrived here. And for that we have lots of tools, lots of talents, lots of godly energy. This is also the difference between a Jewish person and a non-Jewish person. Oh, it's calling again. Between a Jew and a non-Jew. All of a sudden I get a call. How you doing, Glenn? Tables, yeah, plenty of tables, yes. All right. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, bye-bye. So the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew, what's the difference? Physically, we're the same. Maybe we have our noses are a little bit more geared to put into the 5 books of Moses, good old noses. But otherwise, physically, we're the same. What's the separateness that we say, the Havdalah? When we say the Havdalah, we also mention the difference between the, what's the word? Ben Yisrael, between Israel, La'amim, to the rest of the nations. What's the difference? What's the separation? It's a spiritual difference. Our soul has been given a added spirituality because more is demanded of us. We have to put on tefillin, we have to keep kosher, we have to keep the family purity, we have to have mezuzahs, we have to pray 3 times a day, we have to keep Pesach. For that in and of itself, we need a lot of kayach, a lot of strength, a lot of spiritual energy, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot more that's demanded of us. Therefore, we have to obviously have a different type or a stronger spiritual energy to allow us to be that way. That is what we call the immanent energy. That's the energy that he calls internal. It goes into each individual creature according to what is the creature, what it is, what's demanded of it, what is needed of it. For a stone, very, very mild, because all it is, it needs to stand there. It doesn't move and it doesn't produce, it doesn't do anything, it just sits there. So the spiritual energy of a stone or a mountain or a piece of earth is very, very limited. But when things begin to move, like plants and trees and bushes and so on, then you get more energy. And when things begin to move around and communicate with one another, fish, animals, creatures, insects, then they have a little bit more energy. And of course, there's differences between each one. The ant energy is not the same as the bull energy. Can't be. Or the elephant energy. It can't be. And then, of course, you have the human beings. They have a higher level of energy. That's called the internal. Then you have the external. Well, he doesn't call it external because it's surrounding, transcendent level. Surrounding, the only reason why he calls it surrounding is because it can't go in. This is an energy that no one can really tap into because it's very holy, it's very spiritual, it's very divine. We are the only ones that are even aware of this energy, and our goal is that through prayer and through mitzvahs, through connecting to God, we connect to that transcendent higher energy. That's what it means to make this world into a better place than it was. To introduce godliness, goodness and godliness into this world. That's our mission. The mission of the Jewish persons, to be a light unto the nations. That means that instead of just sufficing with the energy that we have, we are to tap into a deeper reservoir of energy so that we can get to a higher place and connect to a higher transcendent energy and bring that energy down, introduce that energy to people. That's a light unto the nation. We can live our lives and just exist. But to live our lives means to grow and to become more than what we have. And we have that ability to do it. Non-Jews as well, they have their level, their mitzvahs, their mandates. But so those are the energies that are identified. Incidentally, you'll see all Hasidic people wearing some kind of cover on their heads. It could either be a hat or one of these big fur things, or these tall fur things, or different style. A little hat, or a square hat, or a round hat, or a hat that goes this way and that way. What is the hat? The style of the hat is depends on which part of Eastern Europe you came from. If you came from mid Poland, you wore the big tall ones because that's what they wore then. And if you came from southern Poland or northern Poland, you wore these flat, wider ones. And the smaller hats came from Hungary, and the square hats came from Romania, and this ones came from here. Anyway, so the hats style depends on where you came from, but the wearing of a second cover in addition to the yarmulke, wearing something else, is a reference to the two energies. And when we pray, we wear these things, or we wear a cover like the tallis over our head, something over our heads in addition to what we already have, because this reminds you of God all over the place. He's everywhere. But the extra cover reminds you of that extra energy that we're going towards, that we're climbing towards when we pray. We don't wear it all the time, but we wear it as as part of a uniform, mainly when we pray, when we make a bracha, because then you're connecting. It's a reminder to connect to a higher place. Just like this one is a reminder to connect to God generally. This one is a reminder to connect to the higher level, to the more intense level, to the transcendent, the surrounding level. Okay? Now, if that's the case, then there's two different levels over here of God, of spirituality. This is his second question. Last two lines. In other words, how does something permeate or transcend a spiritual entity? You're talking spiritual here. If there are separations between spirituality, how do you get through them? How does it work? Those are the questions that this person was asking. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak only addresses the first question in this letter, and then refers the reader to a discourse by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who is the founder of the Chabad movement. He lived about 200 years ago. Our son Zalman carries his name. In Likutei Torah, that's one of his books, where the subject is treated further, and the second question is addressed. The explanation of this letter is meant as a preface to that discourse in that book. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak begins his answer by first establishing that a spiritual world does indeed exist, using the Zohar, which was, by the way, compiled by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This day, the 18th of Iyar, the 33rd day of the counting of the Yomer, is the day he passed away, and that's why we have celebrations on this day. So, Rabbi Shimon in the Zohar, as a proof text, he brings that as his proof. Who was Rabbi Shimon? We're going to talk a lot about him later. But Rabbi Shimon was one of the Talmudical sages, one of the Talmud sages. He appears in the Talmud quite often, but not during the Talmud times, but during the Mishnah times, right during the times of the Romans, quite early on in the Talmud compilation. He also compiled the inner part of Torah. He was the first one to transcribe that. Until that point, there were certain books that were available, but they were not really out there. He wrote his book in Aramaic, the Zohar, and the Zohar is unbelievable. That is the opening of everything. That is the gate to all kinds of mysticism, all Jewish mysticism. It's all big. That's the Bible of Jewish mysticism, the Zohar. The word Zohar, where is Itzik Zohar? He's not here. The word Zohar means to be shine, to be bright. Furthermore, the spiritual world parallels our physical world in structure. They differ, however, in that one is coarse and corporeal, that's this world, of course, while the other is spiritual and pure. The spiritual world referred to in the Zohar is really an infinite ensemble of worlds. It's not just one world, but it's infinite amount of worlds. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak classifies these worlds in two classes, revealed worlds and hidden worlds, and further categorizes them as the four worlds, Atzilut, Beria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Those are the four worlds of emanation, creation, formation, and actualization that we mentioned before. So, in other words, there are infinite amount of worlds if you start looking into it, if you start getting into it, if you start breaking it down. But for our purposes, because it's impossible to understand anything about infinite in our very limited capacity, there's a generalization of four worlds. The four worlds that are known to us, that the Ari talks about, and then before that, the Zohar. Ari, it was in 1500. The Zohar talking about the turn of the beginning of the Common Era kind of thing, or around there, in that area, in the first century. Okay, now the nature of the worlds. What are these worlds? The world of Atzilut, the top world, Atzilut, contains all of the elements implicit in a spiritual world, which are the various divine chambers. And those are, what are the divine chambers? The 10 Sefirot, or the orderly system of orot, light, and kelim, vessels. We touched on this in the previous discourse. In order for energy to come down to this world, there had to be a projection of like a chain of different elements. One bears the other, bears the other, bears the other, in order for this world to come. So you got God on the top of this chain. God is the complete, infinite, and transcendent being that is not even possible to understand at all. You're talking about the most remote level of godliness. The essence of godliness is no way that we can possibly comprehend that, because ultimately everything comes from God. So that every little crustacean in the big, wide, vast ocean, and every little ant and creature and creepy crawly that's in this world, all comes from God. That means that He knows everything that happens in this world, everything that happens in this world, because He knows Himself. It's all from Him. It's all Him. That means when we say that everything has an energy, godly soul, that means He is in everything. And He is the source of everything. Except that when you look at God, you don't quite think of a crustacean. You just barely can think of Him as a human. And He has human features. He introduces Himself with human features. God is happy, God is sad, God stood, God sat, God raised His hand, and God thought, and God... This is human terms, just that we should be able to, as the Talmud expresses a number of times, just that we should be able to have a comprehension. And as somebody wrote in the Good Shabbos email of not this past week, but last week, that the book of Job says when you look at yourself, you can perceive God. Not that you are God, but we are created in the image of God. But that's the interesting thing about human beings. Not one person looks the same, even identical twins. No one, in billions of people, not one of them has the same face. If you look at billions of horses, they're all going to have the same type of face. And eventually you're going to find two that are exactly the same. Except for snowflakes, human...
horses.
Really?
Probably.
We may not be able to distinguish it.
What?
What was that?
Not if you know
Probably for
horses.
those who don't know horses, maybe if you know horses, you can tell the difference.
You might be able to tell the difference between 4 or 5 horses, but if you have millions of horses around, you won't be able to. If you're horsing around, you won't be able to. You won't be able to distinguish them. If you see,
That's the final word.
if you see a bunch of chickens, Fred is a chicken expert. If you see hundreds of chickens, are all of them going to be
Well, to me,
different?
yeah, probably, yeah.
Every single one of them. You
Sure.
Yeah, you know what the
Oh, of course, yeah.
To me, they're all a bunch
They
of
might
feathers.
look the same, but to us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even a spot or even a behavior,
if you're a male chicken, the females look different to you.
I would hope
and they
so.
smell different.
Well, I don't know that. They use perfume.
So the bottom line is that with human beings, there's not a single face that is the exact same. No one has the same face. And God created each one of us differently. Yet we are all created in the image of God. He says in the Torah, right at the beginning, as He creates a human being, He says, I'm creating the human in the image of God. What does the image of God mean? That we have eyes and nose and mouth, just like God has? Not quite. Not quite. So it can be translated in various levels. You can say that the eyes represent the look, and the nose represents the this, and the ears represent that. And you can say that. Or you can say, well, if you look at God's name, you got a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. And so you have the Yud part of the eyes is a very small element. The Vav is a long, like a Vav that sticks out. And the mouth is like a Hey because it opens up. You can find different things in God's name. Or you can take it deeper and deeper. There's all different elements, what it means in the image of God. It can mean we think, we can create, we can innovate, unlike the rest of the world. There's all kinds of different meanings to what it means in the image of God. Bottom line, though, is that we are created in the image of God. That means that we are God-like in certain areas. So if we look at ourselves, we can have a perception, understanding of God. However, the God that we understand is not the God that we really... If we understood God, then he wouldn't be God. He would be like us. What would be the difference between a human being and a God? You can't understand God. So ultimately, when you get to the essence of God, you're going to get to a being that it's not possible to comprehend. A being that doesn't take any space, that knows everything that's going on in this world without a computer. I mean, and that's just this world. And what about all the rest of the planets and the universe? And then past that, the spiritual world. How does that work? We don't know. We can't comprehend that. That's not possible. From that level of godliness begins the transition, the travel, as soon as it sort of emanates out of him, if you will, to create this world, it begins a transition. And in Kabbalah, it's called tzimtzum, constriction, as the energy moves on. These four worlds are the generalization of this information, of this energy being projected further and further away from God. So each one of these worlds, it becomes less intensely spiritual, less intensely godly as it moves on, until you finally get to this world, and then within this world itself, the infinite differences between humans and rocks. Well, most humans. Or between humans and worms. Most humans. The impossible comparison between the two.
I have a question about worlds, because you keep talking about worlds and physical world. Are you just referring to the Earth, or everything we know that physically exists in the universe?
Yeah, we just call the universe as the world.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just the whole universe. Yeah. The whole universe is here for this world. I don't know how that is explained.
Okay.
I don't think anyone knows. Even the scientists are not quite sure. They don't know what the rest of the universe carries, and we haven't been to the end of the universe. However, they do know. So therefore, there's no knowledge of this. I just know from Torah that God created the entire universe as it is, so that this world should be exactly where it is and be able to fit and be where it is and have everything that is this world. And that's why you have these distant planets that are billions of light years away, whatever it is. All of them is so that this world should be. How that works, I have no idea. I'm just saying things now. No one has any idea. It hasn't been investigated. No one knows what's going on here. But somehow they're all interconnected. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen that thing that they send out on the emails. You get these things where you see a magnified, tiny, maybe bacteria, and it's like magnified 30,000 times, and you see like an image, and then it goes further and further away until you suddenly see the world as it is, and then it goes further, and then it shows you in the Milky Way how a little speck of dust, and if you go even further than that, it's gone. The world is not even, you can't even see it. Yet everything is here for this world. That's what the Torah teaches, that whatever God created was so that this universe, this world within the universe should be exactly how it is and what it is. How that works, I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows how these kind of things work. We're way far away from getting to the bottom of that. But that's what it says, that everything that is in this universe is here for one purpose, that this world should be able to be a world on the lowest extreme of spirituality, which is where we are, corporeal and physical and coarse, he says, and that in this world should come human beings, and that these human beings, despite the distance from God, even within the universe, despite that distance, should have this relationship with God. And that the Jewish people who were chosen to be the example to the rest of the world, that this relationship is possible. So when God chooses a nation within Egypt and says, I want this nation, takes them out, extracts them from Egypt, and takes them to their land, gives them a land, and says, this is yours, and this is how I want this world to run, this should be an indication to every other human being that they could also have a relationship with God, which was the pinnacle of that was during King Solomon's time, where all the nations would come to Jerusalem to meet the king and to pray and to worship in the temple. That's what the Book of Kings describes. That they all came to him. That's the goal. So everything that there is for one thing, that this world should be exactly where it is. How that works again, I have no idea. No one does at this stage. So the world that we say about our world means really our universe, whatever is here in the physical realm of the universe. But then there above that, there's identified 4 worlds. Each world, its purpose is to diminish somewhat and to change, to alter the godly energy that eventually this universe should be able to be created and that this world should be in here. But the energy is so minute at that point. The energy is so small, is so less intense that,
Diluted.
okay, diluted, that eventually you can hardly see it. You have to imagine it. You cannot perceive God by simply looking outside. If you look at your skin, you can see your skin. You have to think, you have to contemplate, you have to really work on it. That is the intention, that this world be darkened, so to speak, as a metaphor. It should be not apparent that God is here, and within that type of atmosphere, to be able to project godliness coming from us, God-like people, into the world. That's the goal. So that's why he's using these terms. The world of, let's start again, the nature of the worlds. The world of Atzilut contains all of the elements implicit in a spiritual world, which would be the various divine chambers, the 10 Sephirot, which is the orderly system of Orot lights, and Kalim vessels. We discussed this in the previous discourse, that the lights are energies of God that come into this world, and each one of them has a vessel, and each stage has a vessel that takes this light and does something to this light, to this energy. And these are the 10 that are on this painting that Robert made. And number 1 would be up there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you have 10 circles over here, and each one of them is interrelated, which is important to know. And then eventually it comes down to the 10th and the final, the bottom of the scale. And I wrote about this briefly in the Good Shabbos email. Those who attended these classes when we went through this will read last week's Good Shabbos email. This comes in there in regard to the significance of number 50, which somebody's writing about in honor of my 50th birthday that's on its way. So each world possesses these 10 vessels through which travels this light. And the light is diminished or diluted as it travels through these 10. And then it goes to the next world, and that same process happens again. It gets more diluted. So the bottom one is the most, it receives from all the other ones on 10, but by the time it receives it, number 10, it's already a lot diluted. Then it, in turn, becomes even more diluted to reach out to the next world. It is nonetheless, all of the world of Atzilut, who's talking about now, the highest world, the world of emanation, it is not what the Kabbalists would term a created entity. The world of Atzilut, the first world, they don't use the term created. The created world, the world of creation, is the next world, the second world. The first world is the world of emanation. It is rather the emanation of various elements that existed in a concealed state prior to the emergence of Atzilut. Before the world came out, there were certain spiritual energies that were more a direct level of godliness, and that's where this world came out. In other words, you can call this world the end of the infinite levels of godliness. It's the bottom of the rung of godliness. The next world or level after that is considered creation. When you say the word creation in Hebrew, bara, bereshit, bara, Elohim, those are the first 3 words of the Torah. In the beginning, God created. That word bara, the word in Hebrew, bara, means to create something from nothing. Or ex nihilo, we say in Latin. Ex nihilo means from nothing, nihilo, to something. Meaning that something is created. Previously, it would have been spiritual. It would have been,
Gornish.
I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Nothing, or we would use the term intangible. So if you created a painting, you don't. It's not really creating. It's taking colors and putting them, setting them out in different shapes. But it's very close to creation because it was an intangible thing in your mind, and you sort of created it. Or even more, if you put a seed into the ground, the seed has to decompose before it creates anything. It's not the seed that grows, it's the earth that grows. The seed just tells it what to produce. And the seed opens up and it rots, becomes nothing. And from that nothing, the earth now knows what to produce. It's an apple tree or a blade of grass, but it's from a seed or from a previous a leaf or a trunk or whatever, or a piece of wood, whatever it is that you're planting. But the original has to fall apart so that the earth can produce that. That's called nothing. From nothing comes something. Of course, it might be a tiny little germ, something that you can't even see with a naked eye. Same thing about creation of human beings. It can't even be seen to a naked eye.
They didn't know about those things back then.
Oh, they did. The
They
Talmud
didn't
talks
have
about it.
microscopes.
Oh,
They didn't have microscopes.
I'm not
so
sure what they
couldn't-
had, but Talmud describes all of this.
No, but I mean physically, they couldn't see that there was a
Right?
cell,
They couldn't prove it.
a cell.
I mean, they couldn't prove anything. You're right. They couldn't actually prove it to their own physical eyes.
I mean, it looked like nothing. It looked like
Right.
it came from dirt
No, they don't say it came from dirt.
or
They don't.
earth.
They're not. They don't say it came from dirt. They say that the dirt produces it because it's
Oh.
impossible for a germ of that small to. When it comes to human beings, so it's an unseeable. You can't even see it with your physical eye. Even the egg can hardly be seen with a physical eye. Could probably not be seen with it's so small. But the sperm is even smaller. So. How do you get a human being from there? So that's the beginning of creation. That we can follow. But when you have a tree trunk that's 100 feet tall, and the beginning of it is so small, it can't do it without the fluids and the blood and all the other things, all the other factors that come in. So it's not just the seed. The seed is the flash, the projection, the beginning of it. But ultimately, it needs the earth to make it happen. In other words, it's not just being planted in the earth, but it takes from the earth, and that's what it uses in order to grow. So, and it's the earth, or the water, whatever it is that it's using to grow. It doesn't say that it's not the seed, that the seed becomes nothing and rots away and is absolutely nothing. It doesn't say that. What it's trying to say is that the seed rots. It's not the seed that's making it happen. It's the combination, putting the seed into the earth. That's what it's saying. And without the earth, you wouldn't be able to. If you took the seed and just open it up yourself, there would be no possibility. And not only that, when you look at the seed, you say, this seed, this little pit from an apple is going to create an apple tree, which can produce an infinite amount more than this little seed can. So we understand that there are energies that are unleashed into the earth, and that makes it happen.
We call them nutrients.
Okay, good. Very good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nutrients.
But you need the seed to direct them, but the nutrients are taken from the earth and used up there. That's what it talks. It doesn't say stuff that is not possible. The sages wouldn't say things like that. Okay, so the bottom line is that the closest we get to something from nothing is planting a seed basically in the ground, because that turns into basically nothing, and then all of a sudden out of this comes not just a replica, but a replica that can produce infinitely, because you can take pits from them and you can flood the world with apple trees if you want. It's infinite, potentially at least. Same thing with human beings that are born. It's infinite, because there could be no end. Some of us go all the way back to Adam. Others go back to monkeys. No, I'm only kidding. And others go back to. Everyone has to go back to Adam. So some can trace their lineage all the way to Adam. Not every one of Adam's children made it. Not every one of Noah's children made it. Not every one of our great grandparents made it further, but some did. Some continue on. We still continue to continue on, and it's potentially infinite. So that's when you begin something from anew. God created the world, bara Elokim. The creation means it stopped and something new happened. It stopped being an apple. It stopped being a seed. It now rotted from the seed into the apple, or decomposed into an apple tree. That's creation. That means that anything that's above creation is really infinite or godly. It's not beginning of creation. It's the world of emanation, the world of Atzilus. Now, and he continues on over here. The name Atzilut is therefore quite appropriate for this realm, for it connotes A, emanation, as opposed to creation. That means it's an eminence, it's just a shine from God. And B, nearness, that's the word of Atzilut, from the word Eitzel in Hebrew, meaning close to, nearness and proximity, emphasizing its close relationship with its source. That's the world of Atzilus. It's a godly, holy, divine place, the end of the infinite of God. Bria, which is the next world, the world of creation, conversely, is the first of the created worlds. In other words, it is not merely attributed to that which lies above it. That means it's the next world down. A revelation of loftier elements. It's like a new creation. It's like a whole new world, if you will. A whole new place. Though it contains the identical world structure found in Atzilut and receives its energy from Atzilut, it still contains sufficient identity to be termed a Metziut, an existent being, as opposed to Atzilut, which is a godly, still Atzilut, next to God, emanation. It's just a shine of God. Whereas this one, oh no, this feels like a new place. Page 15. This character is reflected in its name. Berea means both creation, it also means revealed, signifying that this is a realm that can be rightly termed creation and whose existence is quite apparent. So you have the first two worlds, but so different than one another. The first world is an emanation, a shine, a connection, a closeness to God. And the second world is a creation. This is all, by the way, introduction. We're not even started the letter. It's all introducing what these worlds are, just what the terms.
Emanation, is emunah part of that word?
The word emunah is Hebrew. Emanation is English to something emanates. So Atzilut is not connected to emunah.
No.
Emunah means belief, faith. Emunah also means like amen. That's I affirm that. If you say something, you say amen. That means I agree. I can affirm it. That's emunah. But Atzilut is emanation means a shine or In Yetzirah, the third world, the creation that began with Bria is furthered. The creation now begins to take on a form. Here, the newly created matter of Bria is given more substance, more identity, or more metziut. In Hebrew, metziut means being. It also develops a certain form. That is why it's called Yetzirah, connoting both metziut, which means existence, and form. The word Yetzirah means to form something. So if you imagine you have raw materials, and you go and bring them to Mel and to Robert, and all of a sudden they begin to form pictures and moldings on these raw materials. So you have plain pieces of wood that you bought in Home Depot, and all of a sudden they begin to take on identities because you've taken the wood and you molded it and you've formed it into something, not just a piece of wood. Now it looks like a shelf, or it looks like a bookcase, or it looks like a bima, or it looks like a Ten Commandments or something in wood, and so on. It's a form, your formation. You're forming something now out of what you have. Asiya, the lowest of the worlds, contains the identical structure as the loftier worlds, yet it is the lowest, since it is where creation enters actual Metziut. In other words, it's now putting the shelves together and the bookcase, and now you have a bookcase. It's making it, it's building it. Hence the name Asiya, meaning deed or actuality, the lowest, most tangible capacity. So those are the four worlds. You have the emanation, you have the creation, you have the formation, then you have the actualization, the deed, the action. The definitions and characterizations of all these worlds revolve around one term, Metziut, being, the being. Atzilut is the absence of Metziut, that means there is no being there. Bria is the initial emergence of Metziut. Yetzira is where such raw Metziut takes form, that's putting the moldings on it and all that, and fashioning it, cutting up the wood, it should be right. And Asiya is where the form Metziut becomes actualized. It is thus imperative to have a crystal clear understanding of what Metziut, which means actuality, being, really is, a subject that Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak elucidates here in remarkable detail. So that is the teachings of this world, these worlds, and how the godly energy comes between these worlds. Now, what's the purpose of these worlds, and how do we imagine these worlds? That's coming up as part of the introduction for next week. Then we can get into the actual letter, and then we can understand what the rabbi is saying in this thing. It might take us a little longer to get through this because it's very abstract stuff. But the purpose of this letter and the purpose of this class is to bring it down to actuality, and that it should make a difference in our lives. Happy Lag BaOmer.
Thank you.
Thank you.